Chapter 18. Apparently, Donica knew a lot less about Hollywood than she thought she did. "We don't want you messing with his look anymore," Mr. Mathis told her. "We like the whole Augie Cooter package, the clothes, the funny-looking dog, the weird noises, and especially those crazy shoelaces. And we think America is going to like it, too." "Does that mean I can say yuppers again, Mr. Mathis?" asked Augie hopefully. "Absolutely," said Mr. Mathis. "And forget the formality. We're a team now, Augie. Please call me Brad." "You know," said Mrs. Cooter, "now that I think of it, several kids came into the store yesterday asking whether we had any seersucker pants. I wonder if that was because of Augie." Some of those kids were from Augie's class, because over the next few days more and more of them showed up at Truman wearing things that had obviously come from the racks of Too Good to Be Through. The talk at Bethy Hudson's lunch table changed from horses to crocheting, and pretty soon all the girls were making homemade shoelaces just like Augie's. Kids were getting into charving, too. Grocery stores in Wauwatosa reported record sales of American cheese slices. The excitement about Augie going to Hollywood was building to a fever pitch. Donica switched gears immediately and became as fierce about preserving Augie's image as she had been about trying to change it. "If any reporters show up, make sure you prip as much as possible," she told him, "and toss in a couple of yuppers, too." She also suggested that besides saying yuppers, he add nopers to his vocabulary. Augie didn't get it, but everybody who knew Donica could tell that the reason she was helping Augie was in order to get something for herself. And it worked, too. Once the papers got wind that Augie's manager was a pretty little 10-year-old girl, they went nuts taking pictures of Donica and Augie together. H.T., seeing the potential for even more publicity for the upcoming show, invited her to come with him to Hollywood. Donica's ego immediately grew from large to jumbo size. "Have you noticed she's calling people darling?" Dawn said to Hannah one day at lunch. "And now she's wearing sunglasses all the time, too," said Hannah. "The whole thing makes me sick." Amy just shook her head. Pretty soon, the papers started running stories about which contestants would prove to be the biggest competition for Augie. "You think Augie can beat that guy with the stretchy nostrils?" Bethy Hudson asked one day. "Of course he can beat him," said Donica. "What's so great about being able to put quarters up your nose?" "What about the girl who paints with pudding?" asked someone else. "Who cares about pudding?" Donica said, although truthfully, the girl's remarkably accurate version of the Mona Lisa, made entirely out of chocolate pudding, had made her a little bit nervous. "I've been thinking, maybe charving states isn't good enough," Donica told Augie one day at lunch. "What about presidents? You could charve Abe Lincoln with his top hat on, or George Washington chopping down the cherry tree." "That sounds kind of complicated," said Augie. "You want to win, don't you?" barked Donica, pulling out her stopwatch. "Come on, Augie Cooter, give me George Washington and the cherry tree, and make it good." Augie sighed and pulled a fresh piece of cheese out of his pocket. Charving sure was a lot less fun than it used to be. On Friday, 2 days before Augie and Donica were supposed to fly to California to tape the show, Mr. Snolinowski asked to see Augie out in the hall. "I'd better come too," said Donica. "I don't like my client to be interviewed when I'm not present." "Donica," Mr. Snolinowski told her firmly, "go back to your seat, please. During school hours, Augie is not your client. He is my student. And please don't make me say this again. No sunglasses in my classroom." Out in the hall, Mr. Snolinowski leaned against the wall and scratched his head. "Is there anything you'd like to talk about, Augie?" he asked. Augie thought for a second. "Well," he said, "I have always kind of wondered why you scratch your head so much. When Turk is itchy, it usually means it's time for a flea bath." Mr. Snolinowski looked flustered. "I meant about the show," he said. "Are you sure it's not too much, all of this Hollywood hoo-ha?" Augie laughed. He liked that word, hoo-ha. "I'm okay," he said. "My stomach feels kind of weird sometimes, though. I think it might be my appendix." "It's more likely that you're nervous." "The funny thing is," said Augie, "I used to charve when I felt nervous, but ever since Donica started timing me and making me charve George Washington, it's not so relaxing anymore." "Donica can be a very persuasive girl," said Mr. Snolinowski. "Does persuasive mean the same thing as really bossy?" asked Augie. Mr. Snolinowski laughed. "Just remember to be yourself, Augie, and I'm sure you'll be fine." At the end of the day, Mr. Snolinowski dragged out his record player, and the desks got pushed to the side of the room for square dancing. The first dance was a lady's choice, and all the girls made a beeline for Augie. Everybody wanted to dance with the most famous fourth grader in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. That is, almost everybody. Amy stood in the corner watching Augie and quietly shaking her head. When Augie and Donica got home from school, Bradley Mathis's car was parked in the Cooters' driveway again. Mr. and Mrs. Cooter were down at the store meeting with another plumber, so no one had been home to answer the doorbell, leaving Brad no choice but to wait on the porch steps. "Augie, we've got a problem," he said. "Sorry, Brad, but before I do anything else, I have to take Turk out," Augie apologized. "Otherwise, I might end up with the kind of problem that leaves a stain on the rug." While Augie walked Turk, Donica sat down next to Brad on the steps and asked him what was the matter. "The problem is, Augie fever is spreading faster than we thought it would. It's gone way beyond Wauwatosa. Kids all over the country are starting to dress like him and act like him. They're saying yeppers and adopting shaggy dogs from the pound, crocheting shoelaces and carving cheese. He's even got a fan club with a website, prip.com. "Isn't that a good thing?" asked Donica, who would have given anything to have a fan club. "You would think so," said Brad, "but the show won't air for another month after the taping, and the producers are worried that Augie Cooter will be old news by that time. People won't care anymore." Donica felt her free ride to Hollywood slipping through her fingers. "There has to be something we can do," she said, quickly jumping up. She pulled her lip gloss out of her pocket and began pacing nervously as she ran it over her lips. Suddenly she stopped. "I've got it," Donica said excitedly. "It's the exact same thing as the toaster. We have to turn up the dial." Brad looked confused. "On the toaster?" he asked. "No, on Augie. We have to turn up the dial on Augie and make him Augier," Donica said. A smile slowly spread across Brad's face. "You know what?" he said. "I think you might be onto something here. Make Augie Augier, huh? I like it."